Baba. Before I begin my talk, just a few thoughts to share with you. You have heard a lot of experienced speakers this morning. I'm not one of them. I'm a real novice at this, but about 6 months ago when Noshiwan called and graciously invited me to talk, my first instinct was, oh my goodness, no, I can't do this. This is not me. I've never before done this in my life. How will I ever get through it? And and the pitter-patter is still there, mind you. But the more I thought about it, the more I kept hearing this voice inside me saying, Goher, it's time. So here I am. Because I'm a novice, I will be referring to my notes, so please bear with me as I muddle through this as best I can. My story in relation to beloved Baba begins with my father, Minu Kharas, who was one of Baba's closest disciples. His story is of the epic struggle of one soul to overcome the forces of karma, which could only be done successfully through the grace of a living master. To those of you who have not known of Minu, let me begin by sharing his incredible journey, and I mean incredible journey, to search for God, which began as far back as he could remember. As the story of his life unfolds, it becomes more than evident that all his experiences were propelling him to this inevitable meeting with his God. As a small child, he recalls, ever since memory first began, he experienced intense feelings about God and had a longing for God, wondering if God really existed. And if so, in what form and where? And why could he not see him with his own eyes? He was determined not only to find him, but become one with him in this very lifetime. All these intense thoughts and feelings, mind you, as a child, without ever anyone having spoken to him about it. So, his youth was a period of both elation and frustration, culminating in a determination to die by his own hand if his lifelong desire to see God did not materialize. He remained convinced that one day, in this very lifetime, he would ascend to the spiritual height required to find God. He was further convinced that God would, quote unquote, take me along with him unto him. As a child, living with his elderly parents, who came from a very humble background, he was badly neglected until his eldest sister took him under her wing, she having been married into a wealthy family. Under her care, as a young scholar, he excelled in all areas of academia, sports, elocution, debating, and scouting. Nevertheless, she was a hard taskmaster who continually demanded the very best performance from him, and if he didn't deliver, was severely reprimanded. Therefore, at this tender age, he lacked the maternal nurturing that he so craved as a young child, and which was a key factor that drove him away from her care eventually. As a young man, Minu kept up his search for God, looking for him everywhere and in everything, and inquiring of those who he felt might be able to help him in his search and satisfy his longing, but to no avail. It all appeared to be a wild goose chase. Deeply frustrated, he even turned to nature and would take himself out into the open fields or the seashore, where he found himself talking to God as if up in the firmament, and he felt blissfully happy doing so. This soon became a habit, and along with his deep conviction, he was certain that one day in this very lifetime, God would appear to him in human form. Now we come to a part of his life that I feel has a very powerful message, and that's why I go into some detail about that in my talk. I will bring you through this aspect of his life and then how he first meets Baba, and that's very interesting. Then tell you a little bit about our family and his work in Karachi for Baba, and that's how we will culminate. Okay. So running parallel to this intense longing for God, as a young man, Minu was also in the grip of the usual common pull of lust, which assails most young people, and which in his case went largely unchecked, so that the devil had a free hand. The dreadful habit of self-abuse continued unabated for a number of years, and soon all his outstanding qualities and intelligence were negatively affected. Without the proper guidance, he seemed a lost soul. To further complicate matters, at an early age, when he found himself in all innocence declaring his love to a married relative lady, she reciprocated by nurturing him and taking him as one of her own. And soon this bond became a very deep and lasting relationship. Needless to say, this created a great deal of conflict within the family as the years went by, but Minu remained unaffected by any negative repercussions, and his love for this relative lady grew in fervor and intensity. In his own words, this intense feeling of love was like a hidden volcano propelled by some mysterious force of past lives, which neither of them could understand. It defied all human comprehension. Thus, we see this amazing tug of war between the intense search for God on the one hand and the equally strong pull of lust-love feeling on the other. To add yet another aspect to this realm of lust and physical love, Minu states that as a child, on more than one occasion, an unnatural physical offense was attempted on him by more than one person. But in spite of these disturbing episodes, he always felt he was protected by some invisible, supernatural power. With this background, one can only imagine the conflicting emotions and frustrations which were surging through him as a young man, but which would eventually propel him onward, and together with a series of unforeseen circumstances, brought him to the threshold of his beloved God. Now, Minu had 4 friends who were also spiritually inclined, and together they made a pact to search for God, each one of them taking a different direction, east, west, north, south. Okay? And when one of them, if any one of them would find him, he would then inform the others. Now, this is an important point, so keep in mind. Minu's ardent search for God led him down many different paths, including visiting holy shrines, temples, churches, mosques, etc., and crossing paths with various sages, saints, yogis, sadhus. But none of this brought him any closer to finding his God. His faith and determination remained strong, however, until one day when a man who displayed wonderful occult and physical and psychic powers attempted to commit an unnatural offense on him, and he finally managed to escape after a fearsome struggle. This episode so disillusioned him that he vowed to make one last attempt, and if God were indeed only hiding and was who he said he was, and knowing the depth of Minu's love for him and conviction to find him, then it would be God himself who would come to his rescue and spare his life. Otherwise, his life would end on a hill on the outskirts of the city. So a clear note was sounded to God, and on the appointed day, without informing anyone, he quietly slipped away to that location. Either his life would end, or by some miracle, he would be saved. Midnight was the appointed hour, and Minu fully expected and was ready for the former outcome. However, most miraculously and unexpectedly, one of his 4 spiritual friends came running up that hill and found him in the nick of time. Okay, I lost my place, sorry. He found him. He managed to convince Minu that he had been sent by a yogi of a high order, and even though this yogi had not found God himself, he would be instrumental in leading Minu further in his search. Pleasantly surprised, Minu found he recognized this elderly yogi who lived next to the graveyards and as being a teacher at his old school. He also discovered that he had been under the protection of this yogi, who in one of his nightly samadhis or deep meditations had seen the impending tragedy to befall Minu and had tactfully and forcefully sent his friend to find Minu and had inwardly guided him to the exact spot. This, I think, is one of many unusual circumstances that shaped Minu's destiny. Thereafter, Minu kept in close association with this old yogi, whose name was Master Ram Sundar Pandey, and felt blissfully happy to be in his company. The yogi said he had found a great soul in Minu, whose last few lives were unnecessarily lost. He would insist on Minu performing japa, which is silent meditation and recitation of certain mantras, which he said would henceforth protect his life from such dangers as snake bites and gunshot wounds. He also gave Minu a sacred thread, which Minu was to keep on his person, and which would further protect him from all evil forces and save his life, cautioning Minu not to take any of this lightly. Minu mutely obeyed the yogi, although not fully understanding why, but felt instinctively that there was some supernatural power guiding him in his quest. He had also been an avid scholar of books on spirituality, and one day was overjoyed to discover in one called Kabir Vani by the acclaimed poet and perfect master Kabir Sahib that God does appear in human form during certain spiritual periods. At last he had found God, if yet only in a book. This finding, though, fit like a glove when he further discovered that this was one of those times. During this period, another curious thing happened. Suddenly, in the course of a single day, Minu set about collecting images of all the known prophets of history, beginning with Zoroaster, Ram, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, and ending with the mayor of Karachi, which Jamshed Nasarwanji, who was then his ideal in life. Okay. He had all these pictures framed and he mounted them at the head of his bed, calling it the ladder of ascent, beginning with his ideal at the bottom and continuing in reverse chronological order to Lord Zoroaster at the top. He was convinced that one day he would rise to the required height to find God. This curious event also played a significant part in his quest, as we will see. Then one day the old yogi told him he would soon be doing parade. This did not make any sense to Minu, who was working as an insurance clerk at the time. But this prediction soon came true, as Minu found himself bound for training as a student at the Central Police School in Nasik. When departing Karachi by ship, the old yogi came to see him off at the docks, garlanding Minu and bowing down to him. How very strange, thought Minu. Pandey then told him that in Nasik he would encounter a very holy man in a certain direction from the school, and that Minu should not leave him at any cost. Little did he dream how important this prediction would prove to be. Two events which occurred consecutively upon his arrival at the police training school in Nasik illustrate the importance of Minu's association with the yogi Pandey in Karachi and further prove it was divinely orchestrated. On the very first evening of his arrival, around sunset, he walked out into the fields a little distance from the school to have his usual talk with God, as was his practice. And he was sitting on a boundary marked stone. At the same time, one of the officers of the school was trying out a new gun at a good distance, and thinking Minu to be a good target, started firing unwittingly in his direction. Some servants of the school, including a barber, witnessed this near catastrophe and immediately ran to him in a panic and found that miraculously he was unharmed. Okay. Miraculously? Sure. Wondering, Minu wondered if the mantras he had been repeatedly assigned by the yogi had indeed protected him from gunfire. The next morning, that same barber, upon entering Minu's room on his usual rounds to attend to the needs of the students, recognized him from the previous evening and noticed the ladder of ascent on his wall. Observing Minu to be spiritually minded, thought he would be a total misfit at the school, and instead, raising his hand and pointing in a certain direction, suggested that he go and see a holy man who was then residing at the Circle Cinema on Bombay-Agra Road. Upon hearing this, Minu remembered with a shock the prediction of the old man Pandey. He was further shocked to know the identity of this holy man as Meher Baba, as he remembered coming across that name several years back. It so happened that during his school matriculation exam, while staying at his aunt's house, he had come across a magazine called Hindi Graphic, which was placed in the lavatory as toilet paper. And on the cover of this magazine was a photo of this holy man with the caption, His Holiness Shri Meher Baba. This was in 1928. And it was during this period that Minu was at the height of his frustration, considering all so-called saints, sages, and holy ones as nothing short of cheats and rogues. Even so, he did not appreciate the idea of the photo of a man said to be holy to be kept in a toilet. So he tore off the cover with the photo and kept it in a folded sheet of blotting paper and promptly forgot about it. The next day, on his way to the examination, he realized he had forgotten to wear his kasti, which is the sacred thread worn by every devout Zoroastrian. But he did not have time to go home for it. During the exam, a curious thing happened when a small piece of paper slipped off his desk and fell to the floor, and out of it fell the photo of Meher Baba. Thus, this Meher Baba had accompanied him to the exam, while with all the zeal of being a devout Zoroastrian, he had forgotten to wear his kasti. A second incident occurred while playing a game of billiards with some friends, when out of the blue, one of them mentioned that this Meher Baba had just come on his way from Iran to India and had stopped in Karachi. Minu wanted to rush off and meet him at the docks, but was told he had already sailed. So now, with the reflecting on these recollections from the past, and now coupled with the prediction of the yogi and the information that was just given to him by the barber about the close proximity of Meher Baba, Minu was determined to go and see this man, Meher Baba, face to face. Minu writes, January 17th, 1932 was the happiest day of my life. Like a warrior of old, setting out fully armed to fight for his country, he set out fully armed for his holy expedition. He dressed himself in his usual white garments, with a locket containing a small photo of Lord Zoroaster around his neck, the red holy thread given by the yogi in his inside pocket, and a sandalwood mala, which is a religious rosary for prayers. Thus he felt secure and fully prepared. Upon arrival at the compound that Sunday morning, he was met by 3 disciples: Ramju, a Muslim, Vishnu, a Hindu, and Dadachandji, a Zoroastrian, one after the other. When asked who he was and the purpose of his visit, to each he replied, get this, I am a pagal, meaning madman, come from Karachi to meet a similar type of elder pagal, who I understand is staying here. Although he realized these words sounded idiotic to them, he felt convinced that they would internally convey to Meher Baba, if he was really holy, the silent and hungry heartbeats of a true seeker. Within minutes, the man called Meher Baba suddenly came out and stood just a few feet away. Minu notes, he appeared young, strongly built, strikingly handsome, and clean-shaven. His lovely hair flowed down to his shoulders, his mustache was full, his eyes were fascinating, and above all, he had a broad, charming, unforgettable smile on his radiant face. He wore a long white robe-like garment with a hip-length collared coat of cream color, and he was holding a small wooden board. There and then, Minu felt a voice deep inside saying, Minu, here is God whom you have been searching for. From that moment of spontaneous joy and bliss, Minu knew his search had ended. Calling him into a room while seated on a mat on the floor, with the disciple Chanji on his right, Baba asked Minu what he wanted. While keeping perfectly silent and fixing his gaze on Baba, Minu addressed him from within, emptying out all of his pent-up frustrations and all of his disappointments to that day. And knowing that by telling him such, that if indeed Baba was who he said he was, he would know all this and be able to satisfy his inner cravings. To his amazement, using his alphabet board and via his disciple Chanji, Baba said, I have heard you completely. It is since your birth that this instinct is there within you. Do not worry. Do as I say. Forget I. Every night, go to sleep in thoughts of me. Then began the verbal dialogue, where Minu unburdened himself with all the good and bad that he had experienced since memory began, and in his long search for God. He fearlessly told Baba about meeting the old yogi and showed him a picture, and then began disarming himself of all his spiritual paraphernalia, confessing to all these childish things. Immediately, Baba said, this is not childish. It is this that has brought you to me. He further stated, you are connected with me since past lives. I have to repay the debt I owe you. Not only you love me, but I love you. At the end of this momentous meeting, Minu left with feelings that were indescribable. He was totally convinced he had at last found his very own God and the Savior and Messiah that the world desperately needed. He realized all his efforts to this day had not been in vain, and the true significance of all experiences to this point. He found himself recalling incidents from his childhood, for example, which had seemed previously inexplicable to him. For instance, when he was a young child, an old African watchman who guarded the house at night told him that around midnight, when he was fast asleep, God often came and sat beside him and actually caressed him. The watchman vividly described the appearance and dress of this being he felt to be God in human form. The description exactly matched that of Baba during his first meeting in Nasik. Furthermore, he learned years later that Baba was actually present in Karachi at the time and staying only a few houses away. He also recollected that when visiting certain sages and holy ones, like the renowned theosophist Krishnamurti, the sage looked at him with great reverence and took hold of his hands and placed them on his eyes and kissed him, and then placed his hand on Minu's head with tears running down his face. Without a doubt, all these experiences and his entire life to this point had been a prelude of events and circumstances that brought Minu to the feet of his master. He was blissfully happy that from here on through eternity, he would have his own God with him every step of the way. But this was only the beginning, and Minu realized he had a long way to go yet to know Baba, as he really is, to experience his ways and learn to obey him 100%. If he hoped to earn his grace in order to overcome all the obstacles in his path. After his initial meeting with Baba, Minu could not keep away from him and would avail of every opportunity to be in Baba's presence, even going as far as defying school rules and regulations, which were very strict. But somehow, again, in spite of his truant behavior, he somehow or other escaped being caught in the act and being subsequently punished. This would be pointed out to him by Baba while in his presence, as Baba would turn to him suddenly and say, "How is it that you're here at this odd hour?" Perhaps Minu thought later this was to let him know that he was under Baba's protection. During this time, Baba asked Minu if he would obey him, and Minu replied, "Certainly." Baba then gave Minu his first order to read well, then adding, "When I feel like it, in the twinkling of an eye, I shall lift you up. Don't worry. I promise you, I take your responsibility." Thus far, Baba had not directly addressed Minu's consuming lust problem. But on the occasion of his 38th birthday celebration, which included a small darshan program, Baba openly referred to the subject when in front of all gathered, Baba said, "He is perfect from top to toe, but his eyes are very bad." This open hint opened the door to future direct guidance by the Master, who helps each one eliminate the blocks to perfection. Minu's training had begun in earnest, and along the way, he learned many new lessons, such as implicit obedience. Once, after inadvertently and in good faith disobeying a wish of the beloved, Baba ordered him to go away in front of everyone. Minu was crushed by this sudden rejection, not understanding the reason for his dismissal, and inwardly asked Baba for his forgiveness. When called back sometime later, he realized his mistake in not obeying Baba when told to go and have his lunch at a certain time. Minu now knew that even the smallest wish was significant when it came to obeying the Master. Baba lovingly forgave him, admonishing at the same time to never disobey him again. During his stay in Nasik, Minu had the privilege to be in Baba's company often as part of the mandli, taking part in games such as marbles, cricket, carom, ping pong, and cards. But this was also a period of great suffering for Minu, who was deeply agonized at certain intervals when Baba was touring in the West or away for other reasons. He was also suffering physically from bouts of acute appendicitis. Baba would sometimes give him a mixture of lime juice and ice cream, which he would consume, and once he even gave him a raw lemon. And believe it or not, Minu ate the whole darn thing, skin, seeds, and all. Okay. Baba also advised him to seek immediate treatment for his situation from the doctor at the school. At times when Minu completely broke down, being overwhelmed between the physical and spiritual agony he was suffering, Baba would gently caress him like a mother would her child, saying, "Don't worry, you are exceptionally lucky to be so dearly loving me. Leave everything to me. I am doing my best." Baba then instructed Minu to return to Karachi immediately, where his presence was essentially needed. Minu finally had his appendectomy while Baba was away on another trip to the West. Also, during this time, his lady friend, with whom Minu enjoyed a unique lifelong affinity, was undergoing a serious health crisis, which no one had informed him about. He then realized the importance of Baba's order to go to Karachi without delay. In the ensuing months, they both suffered periods of agonizing physical illness, yet each kept the other uplifted throughout these trying times, with Minu leaving the end result in Baba's hands in total surrender. When Minu returned to Nasik in early 1933, Baba began integrating him into the Mandli and gave him the assignment of contacting the former mayor of Karachi, who had also been his ideal. At this time, Minu was also struggling with feelings of anxiety at being separated from Baba, thinking that even if he passed his exams, he would have to leave Nasik and Baba. But Baba reassured him all would be well, even after he got a job, which he would be able to leave when Baba called him. More importantly, he gave Minu a master key pertaining to his lust problem, telling him, "Today I am giving you a master key, which note carefully. He who always loves is in me, but he who engages in lust keeps away from me. Be very, very careful. If you really desire to be near and with me, avoid lust. As soon as you are dragged heavily by lust, close your eyes and try to concentrate on the root of the nose between the two eyes. Don't do this for a long time. Love," he said, "lifts a man up, while passion or lust drags him down." He said, "Do not worry for being lifted up by love, worry for being pulled down by lust. It follows that if you are not pulled down, you will automatically be pulled up." Baba also said this struggle was an eternal one, and one could hardly escape it on one's own unless he had the hand of a living master on his head to free him from it. But when Minu protested, saying how yogis of such a high order had failed in this respect, what chance did he have, what hope did he have of overcoming this? To which Baba replied that he had to make the initial effort and then be worthy of his grace. In March 1933, Minu was present at the wedding of Baba's brother Behram, and after speaking a few words spontaneously on the occasion, which Baba enjoyed and appreciated, he presented Minu his alphabet board, and Minu gave the one he had made, which he also used during his times of observing silence, to Baba. As you can see, these two boards are in my humble caretake right now, and I am so humbled to be a caretaker of such a precious relic. After passing his final exams at the police training school in Nasik, Minu was appointed the job of sub-inspector of police in Karachi and was ordered by Baba to accept the position. There would now be a gap of 4 years when Minu had no physical contact with Baba, but would remain connected via letters from the Mandli and sometimes even from Baba. Finally, he received a letter from Adi Senior, Baba's secretary, informing him of Baba's wish that he be present at his birthday celebration to be held in February, on February 17th and 18th in 1937. Overjoyed to attend this auspicious occasion, Minu was witness to more than 10,000 who were present, and these were the poor to whom Baba distributed cloth, sweetmeats, and grain, and touched their feet. Minu was sent with some Mandli members to the Mast ashram in Rahuri, where he observed the different types of musts, or God-intoxicated souls, and their peculiar habits. This was another important phase in the advent of the Beloved, and Minu was to partake in this work, as he would soon discover. As a close member of Baba's intimate circle of 120 disciples, Minu was privileged to participate in many fasts and periods of meditation on the Beloved, which was assigned to them as a way of helping the Master with his world work for humanity, especially during the dark years of World War II. In June 1947, Baba gave Minu and some other Mandli members the mission of trying to find musts in their own districts and bring them to the newly founded Mast ashram in Satara. Never having undertaken such a daunting task previously, Minu was naturally quite anxious, but eventually, being determined to fulfill Baba's wish, he managed the laborious and challenging undertaking and completed his mission successfully in transporting 3 musts from Karachi in spite of numerous hurdles and complications. I mean, you have no idea about the peculiar habits of these God-intoxicated souls. And so to accompany them, there are many hilarious stories which Dad would relate often, which I'm not going to go into any detail right now, but that's for another time. Anyway, so Minu successfully brought these 3 musts to Rahuri. After staying for 2 days, Baba asked Minu to take the musts back to their old surroundings in Karachi. Baba then hugged Minu and told him, "You are one of my most intimate Mandli." During 1947, while trying to organize a Baba group in Karachi, Minu met Kekashru Patel and his family, one of whom was his daughter, Freni. They soon developed a friendship that blossomed into a deeper relationship. And eventually, with Baba's permission and emphasizing his wish 3 times, as Jimmy just pointed out a little while ago, everything Baba did, he did 3 times when he gave an order that they marry. So he said to Minu, "Marry Freni, marry Freni, marry Freni." They finally tied the knot in February of 1954. At first, Minu's involvement with Freni caused much friction in his relationship with this lady friend who was openly rebellious at the intrusion of this young interloper. But over time, and after the marriage, she eventually accepted the union, and life was harmonious then. In December of that year, yours truly made my debut into the family. And as with every event in his life, Minu right away sent off a cable to Baba, informing him of my birth and requesting him to name me. At the time, Baba was in strict seclusion. Therefore, all the mail was collectively put aside. Hence, I was nameless for 5 months. My maternal grandparents were naturally concerned and upset. You know, he was ranting and raving at Minu for not naming me. But Minu stuck to his guns and just waited patiently in complete trust and serenity. Finally, my birth certificate said Baby Kharas, no name. Finally, in April 1955, due to a tragic accident, when news reached Baba regarding the sad demise of Adi and Rhoda Dubash's young son, Homi, age 4, Baba briefly came out of seclusion, and that was when all of the collected mail was brought to his attention, including Minu's cable. So Baba called his women mandli in front of him, and first pointing to Meera said, "Now there are too many who have been given your name to this point." Next was his sister Mani. He looked at Mani and he said, same goes for you. Too many have your name. Third was Dr. Goher Irani, his personal physician. I think she's been mentioned more often today than I know, right? So he asked her if it would be okay to send her name. Dr. Goher said, Baba, as you wish. Baba said, so be it. Hence that day, April 21st, 1955, Baba had Erich write and inform Minu that today Baba has named your daughter Goher. Goher in the Persian language, I believe, means jewel. Another treasured relic that I cherish to this day. Almost 6 years later, my brother was born in November 1960. And somehow the news had already reached Baba of his birth. And Baba immediately sent a postcard naming him Meherji. My first physical meeting with beloved Baba came in 1962 at the East-West gathering in Pune. I was almost 8 years old at the time, and I distinctly recall the excitement building up in me because I had grown up with Baba at home. You see, everything was, I naturally accepted him for who he was. But now I'm almost 8, and I'm going to see him for the very first time. So, distinctly recall the excitement and the thought that I would be seeing him in person. On November 1st, that auspicious day, 1962, I found myself at the gates of Guru Prasad Palace among thousands who had come from all over India and the West to partake of this joyous event. I remember thinking to myself as I walked to the back of the compound that as I turn around, all I want to see is Baba. And truly, that's how it was. I walked back, I turned around, there he was on the stage in all his glory, beaming pure radiance. I stood there for I don't know how long, just staring at him, just looking at him, just taking him in. I was lost, if you will, in a timeless moment. I watched as Baba gave darshan to thousands, one by one, bowing down and touching his feet. I recall also the intense heat and humidity, and then all of a sudden, a tremendous thunder shower, and the skies opening up and the rain coming down, and drenching all of us that were near to the stage. Baba then instructed the Western and some of us Eastern women and children particularly to be taken into the women Mandali's quarters and be given some dry clothing. Hence, I found myself inside with the ladies, and Baba's sister Mani very sweetly gave me one of her dresses to change into. Now mind you, I'm 8 years old, not even, and this is Mani's dress, which was way past the floor, but then they secured it with this little ribbon, that tied it around my waist, and so. Subsequently, after we had returned home to Karachi, Mani sent me this dress as a memento of that auspicious day, which is yet another one of my treasured possessions. And then I forget the year, but subsequently, sometime in the early 90s, when we had visited Baba as, my family and I had gone there, I took this dress along with me because now it actually fit me. And I wanted to surprise Mani, so I wore the dress and I asked her, I said, Mani, do you remember this dress? And she looked at it for a minute and she said, oh, is it the one I sent you? Yes, Mani. So she was very surprised and very happy. So. Baba also called our Karachi group on certain days for his darshan in the small side room to catch a glimpse of him as we progressed in the small side room for his darshan. Okay, I'll go to the next shot here, and this was also happened to be in 1962, obviously, at Guru Prasad. I'll digress for a minute from my talk. It so happened that the darshan program was over that day. I had been sent home with some other caretakers to the hotel where we were staying. Happened to be the same hotel Jimmy was staying at, I think. And as it turned out, Dad, Mom, and my little brother Mirji happened to be in the compound still, and they were driving Baba around to see the lights which were around Guru Prasad. So they had a beautiful opportunity to have his quick darshan again, very spontaneously. I, of course, missed out on that. Oh well. All right. So Baba called our Karachi group on certain days and in that small side room in Guru Prasad. And I recall the first time standing in line with Dad and peeking out from the side to try and catch a glimpse of him, because, I was little, as we progressed forward. Finally, it was my turn. And this was the first time I was directly in his presence. I kneeled and lay my head on his feet, touching my forehead to each one while gently holding on to them, never wanting to let go. When I finally stood up, I was in his loving embrace. Yet another timeless moment. The rest of the afternoon was spent silently sitting at his feet while he conversed with some, and I recall Dad whispering in my ear to keep my gaze on him and drink in every drop so that, quote unquote, this memory will last you a lifetime. The next and last physical meeting with beloved Baba came in 1965 when he had called only some Eastern groups. This time, when I stood up after taking his darshan, he gestured, "How big you have grown." When my brother Mirji, who was not yet 5 years, bowed to Baba, he just stayed there. For a while, he wouldn't get up, and then he had to be gently coerced to get up. The ladies' mandali had been observing this from behind the scenes and remarked how lucky he was. Our family also attended the last darshan in April 1969 in Mehrabad, along with others from the Karachi group. Minu was a volunteer guide once more, and I recall when we approached the hill at Mehrabad on the bus from Nagar, Minu jumped up and shouted, "Parvardigar Meher Baba Ki Jai," 3 times. We were housed under huge tents that had been set up in Lower Mehrabad for the duration of the darshan program. Thousands had once again journeyed from all corners of the globe to partake of this precious time at the feet of their beloved. When we visited Guru Prasad afterward, I remember hearing the American Aarti for the first time performed by Hank Mindlin and the Sufi group, which was so melodious and so precious. On the veranda that day, I came across a journal in which all were welcome to sign, and I took the opportunity to record therein, "United in your love forever." Growing up with the example and magnetic personality that was my father, Minu, I had the privilege of learning from one of the best. The lessons of faith and obedience in particular were some of the strongest, which left a lasting impression on me and which have repeatedly stood me in good stead throughout my life. I would like to share with you a few stories during the course of Minu's journey with Baba, which highlight these qualities. First, on the topic of obedience, an incident which took place in Delhi in 1941, while Baba was in strict seclusion. All lovers and mandali members had been instructed to avoid all contact with Baba, even to the point of turning away if he was suddenly sighted. Minu was at a critical point at this time, with all kinds of personal pressure weighing him down, and also being at a critical point of breaking Baba's order regarding his personal weaknesses. And not being allowed any contact at the time, he decided to take a pilgrimage to bathe in the river Ganges, if you will. A leave of absence from work was virtually impossible. Nevertheless, he approached his superior officer for permission to leave, which was laughed at, being out of the question. Incredibly, a few minutes later, the officer handed him an immediate order from his commanding officer for Minu to leave at once for Delhi on an urgent and important mission. As it happened, He was at the train station in Delhi, and lo and behold, he saw Baba on the opposite platform. But remembering Baba's order, he immediately shut his eyes and turned away. With a heavy heart, knowing how close Baba was, but obedient to his order, he went back to his hotel and was in a desperately miserable state all night. Towards dawn, there was a knock on his hotel door, and he was amazed to find Chanji and a few of the close Mandli. Chanji said he had been sent by Baba, who was very pleased with his implicit obedience at the train station, but wanted to know what this recent urge to go and purify himself in the Ganges was all about. Baba instructed him not to worry, no need for pilgrimage, go back. After that, Chanji told him to knock 3 times on his bedroom wall. And to his astonishment, came 3 knocks from the other side in reply. Minu was in the Hotel Royal in room 13, while Baba was in the adjacent Hotel Regal in room 13. So even though Minu could not see him, he was blissfully happy to have Baba so close by. A second story that comes to mind took place in Mahabaleshwar in 1950, where Baba had called a meeting with the Mandli. It was held in a stable, and Baba gestured to Vishnu, one of his disciples, to close the door after all had gathered. Seeing an elderly disciple, Gustaji, approaching, Vishnu held the door open, and due to this disobedience, 2 unwanted men snuck in and bowed to Baba, which was not allowed at the time. When Erich pointed out the mistake, they apologized and left, but Baba's mood was spoiled. In anger, he rebuked Vishnu for disobeying him. But right away he indicated that was not proper, and indicated to somebody in the Mandli, he asked them to slap him, which this unhappy person did most timidly. At once Baba said, "Is this the way you slap when you punish someone?" Then Baba asked Minu to step forward and show how the slapping should be done. Can you take a guess? Demonstrating implicit obedience, Minu stepped up and, to the horror of all present, delivered a slap with full force. Baba immediately hugged him and applauded his obedience. And now on the topic of faith. I recall a story that Dad related often, which I believe took place in Madras, when Baba had invited any lovers who wanted to attend the darshan program. Minu, along with his cousin Adi Dubash, were present when Baba was touring the homes of some local families to which he was invited. One location happened to be a cinema, which was owned by the mayor of Madras. When they arrived at the cinema, instead of entering through the main door, Baba rapidly walked around the side of the building to a staircase and a door up there on the top. Baba quickly climbed the stairs, opened the door, went in, and sat on a single chair in the room, which was like a prayer room, with various pictures of saints and holy ones. Upon seeing Baba thus seated, the owner was overcome with joy and prostrated at his feet in tearful surrender. The story goes that this gentleman had silently made a pact with God, unbeknownst to anyone, that someday, if he was worthy of the beloved's grace, God himself would appear and sit in that chair. I never tired of hearing these stories and life experiences of my father, which were narrated numerous times throughout my childhood, and which always left me with a sense of wonder and elation, deepening my own love and faith in beloved Baba. On our way, our home in Karachi was the Baba Center, and we had a gathering of his lovers every 25th of the month, where Aarti was performed, followed by the Master's prayer and the repentance prayer. Then the group partook of some refreshments, and this would be followed by a talk by Minu on any given topic. As a young child, I looked forward to these monthly gatherings with great eagerness and learned so much. Minu would also mobilize the group and organize a day of feeding the poor in the city, which would typically take place on Silence Day, every July 10th. Everyone would gather to cook and prepare the food and then go in teams to distribute it around the city. The Karachi Baba group also held several functions which were open to the public, celebrating Baba's birthday, either with visiting guest speakers or just some of our group giving a talk, along with music and always opening with the Master's prayer. And now in closing, love, faith, obedience, surrender. These are the qualities of a true aspirant and seeker of God. If one has intense longing for God, his relentless search will inevitably lead him to the feet of his Master. His implicit faith and obedience in the Master's wishes finally culminates in total surrender. Mind you, this is no easy task and can only be possible when one has earned his grace. He then masterfully guides you out of the quagmire of your deeply rooted sanskars to help you overcome all the hurdles you put in your own path and finally sets you free. This was the destiny of my father Minu, a true God seeker. Parvardigar Goher. As Minu would end anything and everything, Parvardigar, Meher Baba, Ki Jai.